Hello and welcome to this episode of Captains of Industry. I'm Fifi Peters. Today we're putting the spotlight on Nigeria's banking sector, specifically Access Bank, which is one of Nigeria's most successful turnaround stories. The bank went from being the 69th largest lender in 2002 to the third biggest today, and it continues to stir things up in the sector with its various product innovations. We spoke with one of the leaders behind Access Bank's success. That's Herbert Wigwe, who is Access Bank CEO, on his visit to South Africa. Now, Herbert, most people would say that your transformation of Access Bank is your legacy as an entrepreneur. But let's just take it a step back in your career, and we're interested in finding out the source of your flair for entrepreneurship.
Well, let me put it this way. First of all, we worked in a bank that gave us the, if you like, the introduction to how to run a bank. And that started creating the entrepreneurial spirit. But I guess in the course of all of these things, you get driven and say, look, I want to also be at the forefront of creating yet another oasis of sanity. And that was what drove us in 2002 when we decided that, look, coming out of Nigeria, we can create another institution that can come to the forefront of banking, not just in Nigeria, but across the globe, create a truly global institution. All right, and that was what drove us. Let us show that in the continent, we truly have the capacity to create a strong institution. Even though the mother bank is out of Nigeria, but would have South Africans working, have Kenyans working, have Ugandans working, have British, etc., and be at par with most of the large international institutions across the world.
But tell us a bit more about your career before joining Access Bank.
I trained as a chartered accountant. I used to work for a firm called Coopers & Lybrand. After my professional chartered accountancy examinations, I went to work for another bank, or a bank, that basically had struggles at the beginning. And one of the things it taught me was not how to run a bank, if you like, and very rare skill. And after that, we worked for yet another bank, which was one of the global great corporate success stories in Nigeria. And that was where we started, our entrepreneurial skills started getting honed. And when I mean we, I do have a partner who we've worked very closely with in Access. He is my predecessor. His name is Ig, and we built together. And he remains my responsibility partner, if you like, because we keep sharing views on how to push the franchise forward.
So in terms of how to build a good bank, which is what you've done here at Access, I mean, the turnaround story of Access is incredible. And you climbed the ranks from deputy managing director when you joined in 2002, and now you're CEO. And in that time, you have taken Access from what was the 65th largest bank then, and now it's in the top 3. Yeah. Where do you get this energy from?
The energy is gotten from my people. We have the greatest people around us. And we have people who are driven to create and make a difference. And that is where the energy must come from. So it's not just from me, but it's from the entire team. But there's a common thing that drives all of us. How do we create a truly global institution? That's the starting point. How do we also create a sustainable franchise that outlives each and every one of us? So issues of people, planet, and profits. Not just about making money. What do we do to basically add value to the environments and communities in which we do business? Very, very important to us. One of the things I'm going to tell you, Fifi, is that in sub-Saharan Africa, not much attention is being paid to the female gender, okay, and particularly even in Nigeria. Now, meanwhile, there's an old saying that if you train a woman, if you empower her, you empower the whole family. They also control the family purse. We have basically set up a structure, all right, to empower and train female women, across the country. Now, that has come through successfully. I'm talking of taking them from the very beginning to where they become successful entrepreneurs. More importantly, we've created an advisory service for women who have also succeeded. How do you take them to the point where they start creating their own succession plans? All of those things. But by far the most important to me, which I feel infinitely passionate about, is what we refer to as our maternal healthcare support scheme. Now, this scheme is about taking families and helping them complete their families. And we've done this. No other institution across the world has done it. Can you imagine the emotional content or contact built each time you support a family to complete itself? All right? Not just that family, but people who know that you do that. They know it is not just for money, but you are also doing a service to humanity. Now, what has that done? 30% of our of our customer base is women, all right? And you're seeing it come through, all right, in terms of our numbers and all of that, apart from other things that we're doing like our fintech or digital business to support our retail business, which is growing. So those are some of the critical things we're doing that set us aside from others.
Herbert, when you say that you've helped families to complete themselves, what do you mean? So provided extra financial assistance, maybe provided more maternity leave? How do you mean?
So all of that. So let me give you an example. It's proven that if you go to do a procedure, whether it's an IVF or whatever it is, chances are that if you do it 3 times, you will succeed. But some people don't even have the money to even do the first one. Now, and how much is it in real terms? Not a lot, okay? If you support a family to provide that service, for instance, what it then does is that should they succeed, all right, that family perpetually will bank with you. But when other women realize what you're doing and there is a greater purpose than just creating money, it creates an emotional bond. And every other thing that have to do with female health. But it's beyond that, because all the institutions that are involved, that are accredited, hospitals, etc., you are also supporting them in that whole process. So those are the things that will make difference. I'll give you another example. Now, the professional woman in most of sub-Saharan Africa, perhaps it doesn't apply in South Africa, what you tend to see is that they get married. It does not matter the level of education that they have, sometimes far better educated than the men. They leave their jobs in the period when they are going to create their families. Those women need to be re-engaged and resettled after that process, all right? Somebody needs to provide that service and products to help them get back into formal employment. Those are the things that we do that are different, apart from the normal things which other banks do.
Very exciting things, and I'm sure your female customers definitely appreciate that service. But let's just bring it back to Access Bank and some of the turnarounds or the classifications of Access Bank. Now, you guys are classified as a new generation bank that emerged in the late 1990s and that are now dominating Nigeria's banking system. So today, Access Bank and GT Bank and Zenith Bank are now rivals to the likes of the First Banks and the UBA, who have been there for a much longer time. What do you think this says about banking in Nigeria?
I think one of the things it says is that the entire industry is evolving, and I'll just share with you some of what we think. When you see the evolving landscape, a couple of things are extremely important. The first is, how is that bank managing risk? In Nigeria's case, it is even more topical, all right? But some of us have been through all of this several times before. Now, if you look at our numbers, there are certain factors or certain prudential ratios that are extremely important. So what is your cost of risk? We are showing very strong cost of risk numbers. What is your non-performing loan ratio? We're showing very strong non-performing loan ratio. Now, one that is extremely important is capital adequacy, because banking is all about risk management and your capacity, not just to manage risk, but to absorb it. Now, we are showing strong numbers, but there are evolving regulatory issues that Nigerian banks are looking at, particularly we in Access Bank. Now, there's the movement from Basel II to Basel III. I know this may be a bit technical, but it's important for me to share with you. Now, we are asking ourselves, in an extremely stressed environment, or the volatilities that we see at the macro coming, okay, how do we ensure that we always weather that storm? All right? So in terms of liquidity and in terms of capital. One of the things that Access Bank has done different is that we've gone to the market to raise additional funding from a liquidity standpoint to ensure that, irrespective of the volatilities that we see in the market, we will always be able to stand strong. So you find that the stronger players are stepping up to global standards, and that is one of the things and areas we are leading in. You may not know we have a presence in 9 countries across Africa. We have a strong presence in the UK. We have a strong presence by way of a subsidiary in the Middle East, and then we have representative offices in China, in Lebanon, and in India. What are we doing? It's also part of de-risking the mother institution, all right? So that the volatilities we see in sub-Saharan Africa, when you juxtapose it with some of the stability in the stronger markets, it provides a stable institution. But more importantly, we're also asking ourselves questions around what is the future of banking, all right, in Africa? The large international banks that are coming here are leaving as a result of high compliance issues. So we want to be at the forefront of ensuring that Africa is not disintermediated. We must be present in global markets. We must apply global best practice in what we're doing, whether it's in terms of Basel III, or it's how we run our operations, or the training which we are known for in Access that we provide for our people. So those are some of the things that make us different and will ensure that we're here for the next 100 years and more.
And in terms of the global banking system, it is quite shaky a bit, and you touched on your operations in the UK. I'm interested in finding out the uncertainty around Brexit and the future of the UK economy. Is this something that keeps you awake at night?
It does, but I think more and more we're beginning to understand that the ultimate impact may not be that significant. But speaking to our subsidiary in the UK, it is perhaps our strongest outshoot in terms of performance. We're doing extremely well and getting better year by year by year. And one of the greatest things it is doing is that it is providing trade services, not just for Nigeria, but across Africa and in those countries where we have a presence, helping other African countries as far as reserve management is concerned, basically taking the role which the older, more international banks would have done. So Access Bank UK is now asserting itself gradually, albeit, it's much smaller in the international market. So we're very proud of that particular subsidiary. And that is how institutions evolve. Citibank has never been this big. HSBC transformed from being a Hong Kong, Shanghai bank into becoming a global player. So we are also becoming a true global institution.
So in terms of your culture, many describe it as being very unique. So just give us insight into the culture at Access Bank and what makes it successful.
Because at the time we got into Access Bank in 2002, after the acquisition and all of that, we knew that the first thing we had to do was to create people who were truly passionate about serving customers. We set up a training school at that particular point in time, which basically created people who were passionate, people who are professional and all of that. But you see, for me, the most important thing is that we've set up training facilities that are next to none and train our people. If you look at our financials, one of the things that comes through, for instance, is the fact that our operating expenses, last year, or in the 9 months prior, these 9 months that just left, was higher than normal. It came as a result of the exposure we give our people to the international markets, and the fact that some of these expenses are basically dollar denominated. And so with the devaluation, it showed on our operating expenses. But what does it do? It creates a different type of person. It creates that professional that will sit alongside any professional in the world, any global player, and compete. So our people are not just local bankers in Nigeria or within the context of Africa, but there are people who would basically sit aside, beside any professional from any bank that you can think of and compete. So those are the things that have made us different. Now, you will see it in some of the ways we engage with customers. Let me give you a simple example. Dangote Cement is definitely the largest cement company in the context of the continent. Now, at the time they started their cement expansion, we were with them on the very first day, even though we're a much smaller bank, and we worked with them towards raising funds, which appeared to have been a lot of money in the context of Nigeria at that time, into setting up the first cement factory. Subsequently, they've built it 3 times, 4 times more, and a lot more, and Nigerian banks have developed the capacity. But at the very beginning, we were there. But we supported and strengthened their chain, their value chain. But more important than that, I'll tell you something. As that institution started getting to more and more retail, they came up one day and said, we want to create 2 million yards a week. And the whole idea was to support those who do retail purchases of cement. Now, we set up the structure using our fintech model, because we now have a fintech division in the bank, and worked with them and ensured that every retail customer basically had his barcode scanned, etc., and didn't need to bring physical bags, etc., etc. What did that do? It created a very transparent structure for Dangote to reward and identify those retail customers who had met the threshold, and reward them accordingly. Through that technology solution, we have access to a database of 4 million fresh customers. So these are things that are outside banking, but are critical in the future of banking, that competition cannot replicate, because we've created truly innovative people.
In terms of your passion towards technology in the banking system, now many of the view that the introduction of technological advances like cryptocurrency and the electronic banking is a signal of a decline in brick and mortar banking and even the use of bank notes. What view do you take?
I think we will always see a combination. In Nigeria, because of its wide geographical spread, and the fact that a lot of the market is still informal, all right, brick and mortar cannot solve the problem. Now, we have a responsibility, we think, not just for ourselves, but to support our country and the central bank as far as financial deepening is concerned. So we created a digital banking division, all right, and the whole idea was to create a structure where it does not matter where you are. In the most remote part of Nigeria, you can get paid, you can receive money over the mobile phone, you can, through agency banking, cash some money, if you get the point I'm trying to make. Now, that would happen. So you have a demographic that is changing as well in terms of young people. We are blessed with about 50% of our population, I make a mistake, 60% of our population is below 40, okay? Now, so it's a young, growing population. And so there's a changing demographic that is more technology savvy, if you get the point I'm trying to make. So we're at the forefront of making sure that students, the youth, etc., are brought into the formal markets as well. But will brick and mortar exit? I don't think in the very short term you will see it. I don't think in the medium term. There are people in the older generation who would rather go to a bank and do things, even though it's more expensive. There are certain aspects, at least for now, that you cannot resolve over the mobile telephone, which is a critical medium through which all of these things happen. So I think what is important is maintaining the optimal balance and determining the appropriate number of branches to use. Definitely, you don't need the number of branches you would have needed in the 70s.
Tell us about your working relationship with IG. What kind of a relationship do you guys have, and how has this influenced your role as an entrepreneur?
Well, you know, IG is definitely one of the most driven leaders you can have in the continent. We share exactly the same values. At the time we chose to come into Access Bank, one of the things we did was we sat down to ask ourselves, what type of bank do we want to run? Not only do we share the same values, we have the same backgrounds in terms of our parents, went to school in the same areas, so we just share a lot of things in common. And one thing that drove us was the fact that, as a start, we wanted to show that coming out of the continent, we can create a truly global player. That was the first point. Two, we wanted to show that we could create an institution where we could empower Africans and people to be the very best that they can be, not just about money. Three, we wanted to show that there were things around sustainability that were important to us. Some of them I've shared with you already. Things around people, planets, profits, things around gender. Very, very, very important. And there's several things in our backgrounds, all right, that drove us to those kind of things, okay? Health was also important. When we led the continent, and it was I who did it, by the way, about 5 years ago, and we said there was donor fatigue, and we said, look, we need to show that African corporates can help raise money to fight the scourge of HIV, AIDS, etc. And we went country to country to country. It was at a time when in Nigeria, it was considered a stigma, and we felt we needed to share and actually destigmatize it and raise money to fight it. And those were some of the things we had thought about even at the time we started. So we worked together for 12 years. And for us, the 4 eyes were important. You need somebody checking on you. You need somebody, you know, in case I miss the ball, let I get the ball. In case he misses the ball, somebody who could basically get together, work with him, tell him dispassionately, we need to do something different. And that was what we wanted to do, because we believe that taking the bank to the very next level and to the levels that we envisage is not something for one person. At the leadership level, you need everybody together, and you need to create a strong, cohesive team. He's retired, but he remains my responsibility partner. And by that, what I mean is that there must be somebody you can perpetually, like your alter ego, you can share issues with in your deepest moments, you can share at your best times, you can share. And he's basically protecting your boundaries from outside to make sure that the institution is running well. So he's impacted me in several ways, apart from the very strong personal relationship that we have. He's perhaps my brother.
And what other people have influenced your role as an entrepreneur?
Oh, they're great people. And I think as I look through and I think about it, first of all, our parents, definitely my parents did, because they were very accomplished people in civil service. But having risen to the top, they felt that, quite frankly, the way the civil service evolved in Nigeria did not allow or support them after the point of retirement. And they shared with us, look, a lot more people need to go into private sector and build businesses that they control. That is one set of people that influenced us. We also had mentors in the previous institution we worked for, and we can't take it away from them because they absolutely helped us and gave us the authority and powers at the time we worked there to sharpen our entrepreneurial skills. And I'm talking of Mr. Fola Adeola and Mr. Tayo Aderonko, who were the founders of GT Bank. So those were people who influenced us, if I was to pick and just mention a few.
And just give us insight into your world outside of the boardroom. Some say that you love traveling and reading and even collecting art.
I do all of that, but I love children even more. I believe that we must give children the opportunity to be the very best that they can be. I had the privilege of working very closely with an institution referred to as the GSP, which is part of the Georgetown University. And what they try to do is to help underserved children, all right, and bring them and give them education. So you have, even in America, for instance, you have families who are having their first graduates. Some of them not American, some from Puerto Rico, etc., etc. And I've seen what it means to transform little children to be the best they can be, and it's phenomenal. And in my own way, I'm supporting it in Nigeria through different types of charity, empowering them, working with them. There's a foundation referred to as Our Foundation that I support quite a bit that has reached out to over 10,000 children and is building and empowering them, getting people to speak to them, And so it's not just about scholarships, but it's about helping them. But apart from that, I like spending time with lots of children, not just mine, my friends, etc., or referred to as my children.
And in terms of your challenges, you must have undoubtedly had them on your journey to success. So just tell us what the major challenges were that you faced and what did you learn from them?
I'll tell you some of the things that have happened. We have grown through an inorganic path. And when you do acquisitions, people don't know that they leave scars behind. People just see that which looks interesting. Oh, these guys have been able to pull out value from here. You have hundreds of thousands of people who may not be happy with what they've done, and how successful you've been at the acquisition, and therefore you have, deep things being thrown at you. So some of the challenges we've seen are people challenges from the different acquisitions we've done, and the impact on us, not just as an institution, personally, and also what it means to the larger public and how they interpret all of those things when it is successful. There are several unsuccessful or several failures as far as acquisitions are concerned, but because we have been not just successful, all right, but we've driven them properly, so it has attracted quite a bit of interest in us, even personally.
Now, Nigeria's economy is in a recession. We learned of figures that this is the first time in 25 years.
Yes.
Now, in terms of being a hotbed for entrepreneurship, obviously the current state of the economy doesn't bode well for such, and also the lack of sufficient infrastructure to drive such activity.
Yes.
The question is, what do you see in the future for Nigeria as an economy and also in terms of business prospects?
Fifi, Nigeria has close to 200 million people. Nigeria's economy today is about $500 billion. Nigeria can be the greatest country in the continent. Recessions happen. There are cycles. I think what is more important is, just like you've said, how do we take it from here? And in fairness, some of the things that the government has done is, apart from moving out of a situation where, and a lot of has been spoken about it, what is happening in the currency, what they've done now is to actually start liberalizing it, having gone to the Eurobond market. Now, what we are doing in Access Bank is work with government on several other initiatives. I'll give you an example. Agriculture. What do we do with respect to agriculture? What do we do to ensure that Nigeria is less reliant on agriculture? So we're working with two of the principal states in Nigeria, Lagos State and Kebbi State, to provide rice, for instance, to ensure that rice is not imported into Nigeria in 3 years' time, all right? And several other things like that. Tomatoes, what do we do to ensure that all of those things happen? Wheat, and we've worked with some of the largest institutions like flour mills to make sure that, that is grown within Nigeria and used locally. Dangote, to make sure cement is also not imported into the country. What does this all mean? It means Nigeria is going to be less reliant on imports, and that basically helps to reduce the demand side, which is putting pressure on the currency. And therefore, we create a much more robust base, all right, since some of these things are being exported and strengthen the currency. I think we have a very great future. I think in 3 years' time, it's going to be a totally different country. These are my views.
Well, that's where we leave it for this week's Captains of Industry. From myself, Fifi Peters, and the team, it's bye for now.